All right. So, good morning, everyone on Zoom. Good morning, everyone on YouTube. We are live today with Miss Shuchi Singla. She is an entrepreneur and a process transformation coach using Agile, Lean, and Kanban. She started her process transformation career in 2012, and she has worked with a lot of large MNCs. And while working there, she had experience of the processes, following up processes, and meeting the end goals by using processes. She started her entrepreneurship journey in 2014, and now she also advises startups on how to create business processes, how to reduce time to market, and identify problem while executing a work process, and reducing delays in delivery. She also runs a pro bono initiative called Shit Happens, which promotes open dialogue around failures, intending to motivate entrepreneurs that it's okay to fail, but more important, it is to implement lessons learned and accelerate growth. So I won't keep you all any longer waiting. I'll request Shuchi ma'am to take this session ahead. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us.
Thank,
By the way, you all can put your questions in the Q&A box, and you can also put it up in the chat. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
thank you, Akshay. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me over. Yeah. Um, so you want to start, Akshay?
Yes, yes, we can start.
Okay. Akshay, you want me to talk about what are the processes and what is the basic definition of processes? Okay. So see, when we talk about processes is nothing but it's a intrinsic. Processes are very intrinsic. Whatever we do in our life, it has a workflow, it has a process. Even, when we do a simple stuff like going out to a grocery shop to buy a grocery has a workflow, has a process. So for example, when I talk about even a grocery thing, starting from my house to preparing the list, getting into the car and buying the grocery, paying, everything has a this complete workflow itself a process. But it is, from a professional point of view, it is very important to have a understanding of a process because it helps you understand areas which you can improve. Now from a legal term point of view, while you are interacting with your customers, right, while you are doing a contract management, or probably you are doing some kind of a document management, there are certain ways that you would do that, and how you would interact with your customer and communicate with your customer about it, right, will also follow a process. Usually what happens is, since we all are working in a very competitive world, any delay or probably single loop or a single delay can cost us a customer, right? So it is very important to understand the workflow that we follow, and to have knowledge of process, so as we can do something, make small slight improvements to give a better customer satisfaction.
Right. So I would like to start from this point as well, that running a law firm or a law chamber, it's nothing less than running a business in itself, because you need to have clients, you need to deliver things on time. It's not product, it's services, but you need to deliver. So, but there is this intrinsic difference between a client and a customer. So does this affects the processes, how you should have processes, because you don't have a lot of customers but few clients. What do you think?
I think, from a legal point of view, what I totally personally believe is that processes are very important, because the way you communicate with your clients or your customers is the key. So for example, let's say if I have a divorce case, and the way I would want my customer or my client to give me that brief, right, it itself is it's itself is a process. Now if I am just telling my customer to send me a brief, right? In that case, I might have to do multiple iterations where I might have to tell him, no, this is not the way I wanted it, you should send it again. Rather than doing it in multiple iterations, rather we can just have a process around it. We send that to the customer and we have the right information in first go, right? So I think legally we're obviously we are very protective, and information is also very confidential. It is all more important to have a proper process on how the communications happen and how each data that you receive from your customer or maybe your client, right, even if it is a B2B or a B2C, how you're processing it and how you store it. So I think uh, for this kind of environment, processes are more important.
Right, right. So if we have well defined processes, it certainly reduces time in delegation of work as well, because there is channel of communication and people know what to do next.
Yeah,
Right.
because I think mostly in the legal world also, Akshay, it's never a single person's job. It's a
Mm.
team of people who is working, right? Even within the team, how you are delegating that work, who is responsible for what, and and when is the right time to get that information from your peer, rather than following up, adding to the frustration. I think if we have a proper defined process, it reduces the tat time overall, the turnaround time that you have, or even the wait time you overall have. So for legal, it's I think it's the key mantra, right? Having the lower, faster response time.
Right, right. Ma'am, can you tell us more about processes in general? Is there one single process for an organization, or there are multiple processes, or are there parallel processes? How does this works in an organization?
See, one process cannot be same for the other person, and you cannot copy the process from one organization to another. Um, Even if you guys are working with similar kind of customers, even if you are dealing with same kind of content, even if you are following the same vertical or same domain, it cannot be copied from one to another. You can take references, but everybody would have their own processes. Now, why when I say this, everybody would have own processes, it also means because every problem statement is unique, right? Now, for example, when I was doing this for 𝘆𝗽𝗂 as well, the problem statement for them was they wanted to make sure they have a visibility, but it's not necessary the other law firm or the similar organization would have the same problem statement. For them, it could be just that we are not able to work on the feedback that our customers give us, or probably, you know we have so many documents around in our system, we don't know how to manage them. Every organization would have their own problem statements, and a process around a problem statement is defined. It is not that I'll just get up in the morning and I say aaj process follow karte hain, right? It will not be that. We need to understand, we need to have a knowledge of a problem that we want to fix, and what is the target audience that I'm trying to basis that a process will always be formed.
Right, right. So how can we work towards identifying such need of processes, or how can we create the processes? What can be a way to go ahead in general, and then in specific with the law firms, or in the legal industry?
uh, I think the first step to identify a process and to start that, okay, I need to define a process to understand what is the current work we are doing, right? What is the current workflow we follow? So for example, for a legal, there is a customer who reaches out to you. The customer could, now there could be multiple touch points for a customer. It could, the customer could, you could get a customer from a reference, you could get a customer from your website, or you could just get a customer who just walks in into your office. And how do you manage that customer? What are you doing with that customer information, and what how do you respond to that customer, right? This is the, even this is a typical process that we all of us will have. Now a lot of times, one of the problems could be that we do get a lot of leads, but we are not able to convert the leads. Now this could be the problem area, right? Or maybe there could be a problem area, as I told you also, that we have so many documents, we are not able to maintain the version history of the document. We are not sure what time, at what stage did we send what document to our customer or a client, right? So once we know the problem statement, I think we, for the first step that we typically do is to create the current process as is, right? That how do we manage this this flow as of now. Once you understand that, the next step is to identify the wait times or the periods which where there is no action happening, or maybe we are waiting for information, and the touch points where you are interacting with the customer, right? And I think within those, when you have this information, within those you will have to prioritize what is the key problem area. Now, one of the things could be, while I am defining this information, it could be, I get information on time from my customer, but I take a lot of, my team takes a lot of time to process that data or to revert back to the customer. There is a lot of wait time. The
Hmm.
simple first process that we want to set up for ourselves as a team is that we need to respond to customer within 24 hours,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. So once you know the current process as is, you have defined the clear workflow, you understand the touch points with the customer or any other stakeholder, you understand the wait time, or maybe any other response, hold time that you have. Once you start defining that, I think you will by default start identifying the areas that you guys fix on. Because what of lot of times, what I have also seen, what happens is you guys have, people have moment of truth. Arey, hum log, we are taking 24 hours to respond on this particular thing. We should not be taking
Hmm.
24 hours. It's pretty simple, right?
Hmm.
And 24 hours of data will come from your historical data, right?
Hmm.
You by default identify and you start working. No, 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 we should not be taking 24 hours. This is something we should be responding in 12 hours or maybe within 10 hours, right? So by default, that improvement starts to come into picture once you know what you're doing now and you understand what you want to fix.
Right. Right. So it has a lot to do with the specific goals that an organization has, right? Different organizations may have different goals. So
Hmm.
when it comes to like law firms, there are certain limitations that you cannot go out and advertise, right? In this way, it becomes even more important to be responsive of the clients who are already coming in,
Yes.
right? So if we can talk a little more on this area of response, what kind of process we have and what deadlines, or what can be a simple process in which you can define a better response for an organization, because certain queries may need a lot of research before answering. It
Yeah.
may not be right.
See, I think one of the typical way to begin with, to improve your response time, is if we can create some kind of a templatized response. So for example, to understand the customer's case better, right, rather than asking customer to give you a rough write up, or probably asking customer to send you a information on an email, maybe let's take a first step and let's send a questionnaire on what information are you looking at, right? This will give customer also an clarity on what needs to be sent. Because a lot of times what happens is, it could be a scenario, I'm just putting up a hypothetical situation where, when customers start sharing the information and they look at the questionnaire, there is certain information they don't want to share with. They might take a step back, and you will not end up spending time with customers who will not convert, right? So if we have a templatized response or maybe some template questions of the information, this might not be perfect in one go, which is absolutely fine. That's why there is a concept of continuous improvement as well, and we talk about continuous learning as well. But as we move ahead over the period of time, even this document will get refined, right? So the first step that anybody in the law firm or a legal firm can do is, if they can templatize the first touch point that they have with the customer, right? Basis that, then they can probably do some analysis or understand their problem better, and And this will also, and what will also happen is when they go back to their customer to discuss their problem area, they would have a clear understanding as well, because they would have segregated information which is already processed to certain extent, right? um, Now, why, by default, when you're prepared in front of your customer, you have increased that trust, and you would be able to have strike a better conversation as well. Other thing that you can also do is, probably lead by example. So let's say, as a owner or as a senior person of my law firm, I want my team to follow certain specific routine or uh, certain specific things, probably rather than telling them to start doing it, right? I think which also invites a lot of resistance, that this is not how things work, because any change is not easy to bring, right? So probably I might want to start doing it myself first, and then when people see me doing it, not once but twice, after 2 3 times, they will also start following it, that okay, this is a better way of doing it, because by then they also start to see the benefit. um, Third thing that which really works is to break each task in a small tasks. For example, I come and ask you for a report, Akshay, right? Rather than just telling me, "Ki, okay, get me report for a particular customer." If I can break it into small work, like for example, I can just say, "Can you help me with the data that we have received from a particular customer? Can you help structure X side of the data into this format so that I can understand only that?" So once you start breaking up into the small pieces, the expectations are very clear for the other person. One, two, it becomes very easy to memorize. I give you a list of 10 things, you will not be able to do all the time, you will forget it, right? But if I tell you only do one or two things, you will remember that. And the quality obviously becomes better. So I think these are the three things, if you follow, it really helps. So lead by example, try to break in small pieces, and see if there is something that you can templatize it. It is not necessary that the first template that you create is a perfect one and is is the right information that you will need. It will improve as you move ahead. So it's okay if it doesn't work in the first go. Don't get demotivated.
Right. So a question just struck my mind that I've worked with startups. So there is this trend of having a very open culture where everyone is approachable at every time.
Hmm.
So this is sometimes done to avoid bureaucracy that might come up. So can the processes also lead to bureaucracy, and how can we balance the open culture versus having processes?
I think processes will help us to get rid of bureaucracy, because when you are following the processes, a lot of times, most of the times, in fact, processes lead to the transparency within the system. It brings in better visibility. So let's say, as an organization, you're a team of 12 people. You would hear this crib a lot of times, that I am more worked and this person is sitting idle, right? But I have a process where I can see, or where I can visualize who is doing what, right? And what is the amount of work which is happening. You are actually taking away a scope of under the table work, right? Because everything becomes upfront. And eventually, I think if you follow the processes in a right way, and if your processes are not imposed, they are self, there is an autonomy to adopt a process and to improve. The command and control behavior of an organization will eventually go away. See, processes is something which will, implementation of processes, improvement of processes will not happen overnight. It's a journey that everybody has to follow, and for that journey, it needs a lot of patience and perseverance. And I think overall the end goal is obviously bureaucracy getting over. And this is something which I have seen over the period of like 8 9 years of my being in coach for process improvement. One thing that it for sure does is, one, even distribution of work. Two, under the table काम नहीं हो पाता है, right? Because let's say I gave you 10 things of work, and eventually I will also forget, right? And you also say, okay, if she has forgotten, till the time she doesn't ask me, I will also not respond, right? And only talk about 8 things which you have done, and not talk about other. So that that amount of visibility actually starts to come into picture.
Right, right. So, moving on, before moving on to the next question about clients, uh, I'd like to ask you about how the processes work in a horizontal setup where, not from one position to another, but in a law firm there could be a group of senior associates. How can be traveled? Work can travel in between of them. Do we have such horizontal processes as well, or is it always vertical?
No, no. I think there are two concepts when we talk about from an horizontal work distribution. One is definition of R&R, which is roles and responsibilities. So in a team, I would have 10 peers or 5 peers, and we are all at the same level. So it is always better to clearly list down R&R for each one, right? The second step that we also call as a RACI format, which is where R stands for responsibility, A stands for accountability, C stands for consulting, and I stands for information. When you are a team of 5 people, not everyone would be working on all the things, right? There would be there would be a work where somebody is completely responsible for. So for example, let's say somebody has to write a legal document, some contract, right? So there would be one person who would be owning it, so he becomes responsible for that document. Then there is some person who might be liaising with the customer and with the senior, probably for the approvals, or maybe for any kind of a budgets or any kind of a thing. Now that person becomes accountable. uh, and C is consulting, where you might be consulting somebody in the team who might have done some this kind of a contract in the previous project, or might have some experience. So that becomes consulting. So he's not responsible, he's not accountable, but person who are responsible and accountable might just go and walk up to him to discuss that how should we handle it, right? And somebody in the team would just be an FYI kind of a person who you just inform that we are done with this work, we are at this stage. So it is always better to have an R&Rs very clear. A lot of times, one mistake that all of us, be it whatever level we are, even I at times end up doing it, we believe we are, it's a common sense, it is understood, right? Why should we define it? Don't leave anything to assumptions. Clearly, please clearly call it out. R&R definition is very important. I think it also avoids stepping up over each other's domain, and not interfering in with each other's work, and it really resolves a lot of conflicts. You're on mute, Akshay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, how can process improvements, can help in managing clients as well? How can you, because when a clients come in, that is just one step of interaction. Then the client stays and he has to be in constant connection. Then there are payments to be made, fees to be, taken. So in this whole area, how can you improve the processes?
See, 53% of the companies have just one goal: customer satisfaction, right? And I think 53% even might be a smaller number. More or less, any company that works for is for customer satisfaction and getting more customers, right? So, so whatever you do from your organization process point of view. Now, for example, if you are just fixing one process of customer interaction, the end goal is that the communication with the customer is very clear. If you're working on another process, which is probably how internally the work gets divided within your team, right? How are you managing it? If your work within the organization is self-managed, it by default has an impact on the customer satisfaction as well, the way you are interacting with the customer. But having said that, um, it is very important to define the entry and exit criteria for each process. Now, the entry criteria could be that I receive some data from my customer, and after I process it, the exit criteria would be that this is what, after so much of time, I send data back to my customer with this kind of a processing and this information, right? I also mentioned about the touch points with the customer, right? If you have that definition clear, by default your interaction with the customers will improve, right? I think as an end customer, major ask is one, being informed of what's happening, because obviously I think if it's not about contract management, or is not about any GDPR or IPR related stuff, a lot of litigation projects that lawyers get, they are a long term project. Like they are the projects which go on for years probably. For example, abhi corona ke chakkar mein, I think I'm sure that since courts are like working very slow, the projects have been hanging on for years, that with no movement happening, especially in 2020, right? So it becomes very difficult for you also to remember what was the last communication that you did with the customer. So there could be a process also that with each customer you have a clearly defined information, what when was the last communication which was done, right? What was the last communication which what was done, and what are the next steps. If you have these three things defined for your customers, I think you're sorted. And probably you might also want to use certain personal CRM tools for yourself, where you get reminded that this is, you need to get back to the following customer. Maybe it's not that there is some action needed, but just as a warm call or a touch base call kind of a thing, right? So uh, I mean, if you are internally sorted, external satisfaction by will come by default. I think that's the crux.
Right, right. So it's always wise to also be not just be dependent upon consumer satisfaction, but also upon the internal processes and right.
I'll give you another example, Akshay. Usually, what happens is a lot of times we don't have internal transparency within the team. So, for example, I don't want to share certain information with my client, and I'm not very open about it with my team as well, that this information shouldn't be shared. Now, if I create a process within the team to have that kind of a trust and transparency within the team, my team will by default start understanding these things, that this is the information. And we understand this when that information actually goes out to the customer, and we finally say, oh, this was not to be sent to the customer, right? बहुत बार होता है हम लोगों के साथ ये. And this happens because internal communication clear नहीं होता है.
Right. So, talking on this, right now, you also talked about COVID and everything. So, right now, a lot of people are working from home. Even law firms are doing that, and which is, a very new concept for law firms, at least. So,
Yeah.
how can we bring on the processes online? Uh,
I think processes को online कुछ नहीं लाना. आप wherever you are, you have the processes with you. I think one thing which COVID has taught us is that wherever you are, you don't need a face-to-face interaction. Work can continue to happen, right? Even people are interacting with the teams through Zoom, through Microsoft Teams, through various other modes of communication. So if at a team level you can interact, at team level you can also define your processes. I think all you need is just to have a small workflow created of the existing process that you have. That is the very beginning point. And I think online you have a lot of tools which are available. You can do whiteboarding, you can just create a flow diagram on a PPT probably, or maybe you can also use certain other tools which are there, right, in market, to create a workflow. Just create a simple workflow for what you are doing. And from one state to another state, when you move, what, how much time you take. If you even I start with that, your processes would start to fall in place. That's the very basic to begin with. Just define a workflow of each process, from one state to another state, how much time you take. If you just start identifying this information itself, you will start to see that you are defining your own processes, and you will identify areas which you can improve as a team to fix it.
Right, right. So, what can you do to improve the processes you already have? So many a times people have processes and they face certain problems that a process is not working, and people think about, is the process right, or do I need to scrap it, or how do we go about it?
Uh, see, okay, so let me ask this question back. When you are using a calculator, how do you know the value that has been given by a calculator is right or not?
It's usually right. We trust it.
No, no, no. So let's say you send 3 and 2 as an input, right?
Hmm.
And you get answer as 5, but you were
Hmm.
expecting a multiplication. Probably you would know what, right? No, no, no. I was doing a multiply. Probably this should not be the answer.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
One of the ways to understand that your process needs an improvement, or it needs attention, kind of a thing, is gauging your output, right? um, lot of you know lot of times you would have heard people saying that, yeah, we did so much, we worked so much on this project, we spent so much of time, but this is not what I was expecting, right? This was not the output. Even when you're working on a document, your peers or your managers would say that, I gave you 15 days to work on this document, this was not what I needed, right? I think if you know what you're expecting, you know the end result, you know what you are uh, the calculator example that I gave, now you know you were expecting 6, राइट? बिकॉज आउटपुट सबको पता ही होता है अपना कि क्या चाहिए, एंड गोल क्या है मेरा, राइट? But and input you gave was 3 and 2, that was also, so probably somewhere in between, rather than pressing multiply, you ended up pressing plus, right? So probably the processing was not right. Input भी ठीक गया, output भी ठीक गया, तो कुछ गड़बड़ in between hui, right? So the first step to understand if you need any help in your processes is to, you know analyze your output. If your output is not as per what you were doing, which this means you need some input or some improvement in your processes or the workflow that you had followed. Two, check the input that you have given. Could be मैंने 2.5 दे दिया, right? Maybe I had not sent the right data inside the system. If that's the case, you will, uh, catch a problem there. If the input is also correct, then you would realize that there is some problem in the way that data was massaged or processed, right? This will also give you a complete information of your intermediary processes or intermediary steps you follow. Once you okay, one tip that I would want to also call out here is, don't analyze your intermediary process as a whole in one go, right? Because otherwise, if you make a change in some of the sub step, you will not be able to sub steps, you will not be able to see what worked. So make only one change at a time, right? To be able to see that how is it happening. In this multiplication and a calculator example, it was a very small example, but I think we are here talking about the most complex system of the world, legal system, where projects are long, they involve multiple people, they involve multiple level of interactions, and they have a lot of external dependencies, and they have uh, so many documents to handle, right? So in this case specifically, it becomes very important to analyze only one, at least only one sub step at a time. So this is how you define the process, create a process, and start working on it. So don't get confused by the word process as well. Process is nothing but a typical day-to-day activities that you do, right? So process, we are just saying it for a heck of calling it a process, but it is nothing but a day-to-day activities that you perform in your system. So it's nothing additional. Yeah.
Right, right. So from your experience, what do you see that companies usually face challenge with respect to processes, or even the firms when they are creating a new process, introducing a process, or they are, changing a process? What can be the challenges that people might face, and how can we uh, tackle them in a better way?
I think the first challenge is people mindset to try something new. People are very fussy. People become very insecure. I think it is very important to have everyone walk together, and understand the importance of why we are doing it. That's why I said that don't talk about process improvement at all. If your end goal is that, and if you really want to do that, do it in a stealth mode, right? Just talk about understanding the current process, कि हम लोग इस चीज को करने में what is exactly that we are doing, right? Is it really helping us? Let's just understand, because people who are pretty much old in the system might understand end-to-end workflow, but if there is somebody new in the system, they might not know from where he or she is getting the information. How is this information coming? What happens to the information next? So I think if you also introduce a process or a enough way of introduce education to your team, कि कहाँ से शुरू हुआ और कैसे उसको खत्म करते हैं, what's the last stage, even if you start doing that, and if you're giving that knowledge and education to your team completely, I think even that helps us. So I think overall, the first problem is the mindset. The second problem I have also seen is, um, people don't know, team people, their end-to-end processes as well. I mean, the first stage and the last stage, they don't know from where the data is coming, how the customer requirements are being generated. They might not even know that, right? So it is very important to educate them on the complete system you have. So I think these are the two major challenges which I believe needs to be fixed. um, Third, which is rare, but a lot of times people are not are not consistent. They might have a process, they might feel that it is beneficial, they might see the benefit of doing it, but just because they have rush of work, or maybe they have too many things happening in their life, they don't have priorities clearly defined, they leave things in between. So if you have started doing something, I think don't leave things in between, just continue do that. I think one of the steps is also to understand the priorities, right? If something has made a positive impact in your life, in your professional journey, continue to do it. Don't just leave it because time nahi hai. Time is just a bahana. So yeah.
Right, right. And sometimes these things also may look like consuming time, consuming some additional time, right? So people may think, right?
Yes, because you're bang on time, because when we start doing it, obviously, so let's say you are working at certain pace in your project and in your team, and you have a habit of delivering n number of things in on a daily basis, right? But if you bring in additional work, obviously there would be certain decline in that number, right? But then that is also a y curve, so j curve, sorry. So if you see the way j goes, your productivity for some time will go down, but till the time it reaches that tipping point before it takes a steep high. So processes जब आप करोगे वो तो आएगा. So you will have to acknowledge that this will be a J curve journey. J journey होगा वो पूरा, थोड़ी देर drop आएगा, और उसके बाद it will be a sharp increase. So as a organization, as a individual, as a team, you really need to be prepared for that. It is a J curve journey for sure.
Right, right. I think it was a very crucial information for people to know before they go into this.
Yeah.
Uh, So, with this, we come to an end of the topics that we were supposed to be discussing today. If there are any more concepts that you would like to discuss, please share with us. And at the same time, we can take questions from the participants. So, if any of you have any questions, any query, you can put it that down in the chat box, in the Q&A box, which is right there beside the participants button. Please do that, and we can take the questions. We can have an open discussion for him.
Yeah, I would also, like to touch base that have your documentation processes defined. What you cannot document everything, right? How you want to document, what you want to document, and what is the structure in you want to do the documentation should also be defined really really well. um, कई बार छोटी छोटी चीजें जैसे नेमिंग कन्वेंशन ही डॉक्यूमेंट का ठीक नहीं है, यू नो, can waste a lot of your time. So, for example, you have a habit of naming it 𝘆𝗽𝗂 underscore document name underscore date. You know everything, so you get to see ki, okay, these are the documents. But somebody just created a doc with the document name and forgot about the prefix and the postfix. You would not know the versioning ye kis din bana tha, though technology is smart enough, but कई बार उसका सिंपल टैगिंग और सर्च कॉन्सेप्ट ही हिल जाते हैं. सो have some go back and look at your documentations as well, because I think you are very document heavy domain and vertical, and it needs a lot of well thought strategy to be versioning kaise karni hai, probably how do you want to track changes as well. So there has to be very specific uh, highlights and very specific key pointers that should want to you would want to tell your team to take care for the future. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yes. So we're still open for the questions. Uh, if we don't get any questions, any queries, then we may conclude the session. But let us just wait for 2 more minutes if we have any questions, any queries.
I think there is a hand
Hmm.
raised.
Uh,
Saurav has.
Saurav, I have unmuted you. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, Saurav.
Yeah, ma'am, I have submitted my question in the chat box as well as in the question and answer. So, can you see it?
Yes, Saurabh, but that's your personal choice what you want to name your organization, right? If you want a personal branding, then Saurabh Jain Associates is something that you should go for.
All right, all right. I'm expecting more questions which are within the ambit of the topic today. Do we have any other questions, any queries, or should we conclude today's session? I don't see any questions as of now. So, thank you so much everyone for joining this session, and thank you very much, ma'am, for taking out time and being with us for this useful discussion. There were a lot of things that all of us got to learn about. Thank you so much, everyone. See you.
Thank you so much. In case Akshay, there are questions post the session, maybe I can help you there.
I'll share with you the questions.
We can coordinate that.
All
Thank
right.
you, everyone.